Hello, MCU fans! Today we're going to be placing all the Thunderbolts trailer scenes in order. There's been several new trailers since the last time I did this, plus some very helpful information at CinemaCon, so it's high time we put them all in order. Lots to discuss, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. Don't forget we have an April contest running all month long. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook. Best of luck. And we have a membership option with lots of cool perks, so you might check it out in case you're interested. All right, so we'll start with everything looking nice and peaceful over New York. Val is testifying before Congress saying, let's talk facts. We have no reliable heroes, and yet we still need protection. The Avengers are not coming. Which is interesting because in Brave New World, we saw Ross saying, which is why I want you, Captain America, to help me rebuild the Avengers. So obviously Sam has not yet formed the team. Then Val is saying, who will keep the American people safe? So I think she's asking for funding for this Sentry project, which we'll learn a lot more about. Anyway, we see Bucky sitting there, and I think at this point he is a congressman because that pin sure looks like a congressman's pin. However, it's interesting because in Brave New World, Bucky said he is to be a future congressman. So I'm really curious how this all ties together. We also see Bucky saying he has to catch a plane to a campaign fundraiser, and I'm assuming that's his own campaign. So Brave New World, if you remember, was in an April timeframe of 2027, and Bucky wasn't a congressman, so I guess he is a congressman by the time we get to Thunderbolts. Crazy. And then we see that even a congressman still has to wash his arm occasionally in the dishwasher. And also then he spills chili on his shirt in one of the latest trailers. I'm assuming he gets that cleaned up because I think this is the same outfit that he wears to this big time party. So we see the infamous Loki's scepter there on display. And then also we see this poster saying it's honoring the heroes of the Battle of New York, which is why I was thinking this is probably happening May 2nd of 2027. But that would only be like less than a month for Brave New World when he's not a congressman. So cannot wait to see how the timeline fits together here. So Val's living large at the party, and that's her assistant over there on the left. And Bucky, of course, is keeping a close watch on Val. Definitely does not trust her. All right, so now let's look at John Walker, who is reading about his downfall on his phone while his kid is crying away. And on his phone, we can see that the story of what went wrong starts long before his unveiling just a few short years ago, meaning it's been a few short years since Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that puts us, I believe, in 2027. That's why I'm thinking the Thunderbolts is probably May of 2027, maybe a month after Captain America, Brave New World. But honestly, Walker does not care about the timeline. He is just depressed. So we also see him doing some work for Val. I think this is him doing shadow operations for her. We also see that Ghost is doing contract kills for her, and that Yelena is robbing government labs. She's literally jumping off the second tallest building in the world, and you can see little Yelena right there. And then this is really cool. Marvel released a behind-the-scenes video that shows that Florence really did take a small dive off that building. I mean, even Tom Cruise has to be impressed with that. Very cool. So after that big dive off the building, we now see her taking down these guards, utterly demolishing them, right? And just in case, she finishes them off. And then inside the lab, she's got this one guard tied up. She's like, hey, up here, it's like your mind is somewhere else. But then she walks off from him and now confronts this doctor who she easily disables, right? Gets that gun out of his hand. And now she has her prize. She says this could get messy. She then heads down to street level and says the assignment is, oh, wait, hang on. And we see a big explosion. And she's like, okay, assignment is now complete. And in her hand, she's got that sweet little guinea pig, so at least she saved it. So I'm pretty sure that all of these jobs that we saw Ghost and Walker and Yelena doing, they were all for Val. And now Val is done with them, so she's going to set them up to end up killing each other. In fact, she's telling her assistant, I can't think of a worse group of people trying to work together, because she's just assuming they'll kill each other off. Now notice how worried the assistant looks. I think that, combined with some things that she sees on the computer here, and probably she's aware of all this stuff that Val has done with Bob. We'll meet Bob in a second, but notice he's there on the left. She's helped Bob with his telekinesis as he's learning his powers. And then here we see Bob basically turning people into shadows. So yeah, Bob is very dangerous, and I think that's why Val's assistant ends up calling Bucky. She says Sentry's gone off the rails, and he's dangerous. The Avengers are gone. No one is coming to save the day. And see, I think she's talking to Bucky here because Bucky's saying we could be the people that are coming. I don't think Val has any idea her assistant is making this call, and this will explain why Bucky is going to show up in the next big fight scene. All right, so first, though, we have to check in with Dad. So Yelena's going to check in with the Red Guardian. Notice that's his limo. We're going to see that a little later. And he says, I clicked leave on the porch. Your subordinates will be reported to DoorDash HQ. And she's like, no, Alexi, it's me. Open up. So finally, he realizes it's Yelena. His place is a mess, so he throws everything in the kitchen, throws on his robe, and washes his mouth out with dish soap because, why not, right? Then finally, he lets her in. Yelena. And she's like, hi, Dad. I love Florence Pugh so much. She is the best. Anyway, he says, sorry about the wait. I was on an important call, highly classified, lots of work, many irons in fire. So she asks, do you feel fulfilled? And he's like, oh yeah, so full, so filled. But then I think he realizes she's hurting. So he says, why do you ask this? What brings you here? She says, there's something wrong with me, an emptiness. I'm just drifting. I don't have purpose. I thought throwing myself into work was the answer. All right, so he then says, well, being the hero, there is no higher calling. Serving people in the street, being adored like gods. So this is very consistent with his character, right? It is all about being adored, right? Because remember in the Black Widow movie, he was bragging about beating Captain America. Whether he actually fought him or not, we don't know, but he was bragging about it. And he loved the fact that they were action figures about him even because of everything he did in the service of Russia back in the day. So yeah, he is all about being the hero, which we'll see that several more times in the trailer. But she says that's just a fairy tale. So yeah, she's definitely depressed. And then hilariously, notice the Red Guardian even has this poster with him in it back from his glory days. All right, so now I think Red Guardian drives Yelena on to her next mission, although this really isn't a mission. This is Val setting them all up to kill each other, which we'll get to in a minute. But in she comes through this elevator and into the secret base. She then passes by these things that look like IV poles, which means probably they created Sentry in this base. In fact, she finds some really helpful information here. So this looks like different hairstyles they were trying out for Sentry. This looks like different logos they were trying out. I mean, basically, they're trying to build the superhero that would be most pleasing to the public, I think. This says, please do not release. We see plans for the Watchtower, which in the comics, that was the Sentry's base. In fact, this little doohickey here might be what's supposed to go on top of the tower. And then this is fascinating. This is from the latest trailers. Notice Val has proof, photographic proof, that she was aware of Sentry, or maybe I should say the Void's powers to basically, send people to the Void. So that's why I think her assistant was getting so worried about Sentry. All right, so then we see the U.S. agent has been sent there as well. He attacks, starts firing at Yelena. She blocks the shots with her briefcase, but he's firing away. She charges at him with her knife, but he tosses her aside, and then suddenly Taskmaster comes into play and blows him across the room, draws her arrow. Of course, this is what she looked like before in the Black Widow movie. I kind of liked her original costume better, to be honest. But anyway, she fires her arrow and explodes on his shield. And he's protecting himself from the flames. And then we see Yelena, who's actually crouching next to this mysterious crate, which has this OXE symbol on it. So pretty sure that is Val's secret organization where she's probably funneling money for the Sentry program, because in the comics, it was also called OXE. Then U.S. Agent is now ready to fight, but then suddenly behind him, Ghost appears. And she's ready to get in on the action. Of course, this is Ghost's original outfit. I kind of like Ghost's new outfit better, to be honest, but let me know your thoughts on that. But anyway, U.S. Agent attacks her. She phases, so he whiffs, and then she phases back again. Then we have Yelena taking cover and chucking a knife across the room. Ghost phases and then grabs the knife. She throws the knife over at Taskmaster, who deflects it back to U.S. Agent, who then uses it to attack Yelena. This is going to be such a cool fight. But then suddenly out from the crates crawls someone. He says, it's getting so tense in here. Well, they're all stopped now and aim their guns at him. He's like, no, don't. They're like, who are you? And he's like, I'm Bob. So Bob, we finally met Bob, right? That is definitely Bob Reynolds, who in the comics did become Sentry and ultimately got taken over by the Void. And it seems that they were all sent, because she says, who sent you, Bob? And he's like, nobody. Wait, you were all sent? So yeah, most definitely Val sent each of them individually with the hope that they would kill each other off. But then suddenly we see all the openings slam shut, another one and another one. And now Yelena is putting it together. She says, everyone here has done bad things, shadow ops, robbing government labs, contract kills. So those are all those things we saw earlier that I think were instrumental in creating Sentry. And now it's time to finish them off. Because he's like, yeah, so? But she's like, so someone wants us gone. In other words, Val. Well, he starts giving her grief, calling her a former Red Room assassin. God only knows how much blood is on your hands. Ghost says, well, that's pretty ludicrous coming from the dime store Captain America. He's like, hey, I'll have you know I actually was the official Captain America. And Yelena's like, yeah, for like 2 seconds. He's like, ha, ha, ha. She's right. Oh. Anyway, things go from bad to worse because now the room heats up. We get a 1-minute timer and everybody realizes we got to get out of here. So then this is interesting. From one of the most recent trailers, we see Bob starting to levitate, maybe slowly learning about his flight powers. But yeah, they got to get out of this room, and I think this is a total red herring. I think Taskmaster's dead by now because they show in one trailer her with the red background, but then in another trailer, it's the exact same shot and it doesn't have the red. They're totally fooling us. She is dead already by this point in time. I am betting you money. Anyway, they have got to get out of here now. So they start booking it out of the room. Notice, no Taskmaster, obviously. Anyway, they get out just in time, and now they need to make their escape. So that's actually Yelena, and we're going to see Bob. So Yelena starts firing on somebody. Turns out it's U.S. agent going, no, stop, it's me, it's John. And she's like, well, where were you? And he's like, well, where were you? Anyway, the reason I say that's Bob is he's wearing those same pajamas we saw earlier. He's now blindfolded and handcuffed. So obviously he doesn't realize he's got super strength yet. So here's another shot from Empire that shows Yelena and Bob together. And I love this shot of all 4 of them together. Again, no Taskmaster. Then at some point, I think Bob must get separated from them. And now they go down this long tube, this long, like maybe elevator shaft. Notice the lights behind Ghost there. This is the same elevator shaft that in another trailer, we see poor John Walker falling because those lights, you can see him on the left, all the way down. That's Ghost and Yelena there. And he lands on the shield, thank goodness, to protect some of the impact, but he still looks in a lot of pain. Okay, so they all seem to get out of the building, and Bob is left behind because we see some of the guards coming up. Bob bursts out of the wall, and they're all trying to decide what to do. So, well, what else do you do when you have machine guns? You open fire. So they fire a bunch of shots at him, and all it does is make him mad. In fact, we see like this shot where everybody seems to get wiped out. Now, I don't know if that's him using his void powers or if he's just using telekinesis and blowing everybody back, but they're taken care of. I think they're all gone. What I don't know is what happens to Bob, because I do believe now we see Val showing up to assess the damage and all the craziness. That's her assistant there on the left. In fact, here's a shot from Empire. We can see them all standing there. And then here she is with one of her main dudes, this dude on the right. We're going to see him later in the trailer, but I think he's probably her number 1. Notice he has the OXE on that we saw earlier, so that's her organization again. So yeah, I'm really curious what happened to Bob, but I'm assuming that he joins back up with Val again because we're going to see the 2 of them together in a moment. Meanwhile, we have Red Guardian limo service to the rescue, that same limo we saw earlier. In fact, I love it. We actually saw the same limo bringing everyone to CinemaCon with David Harbour driving them in the limo. It was brilliant. Anyway, we have Red Guardian saying, oh, America, so big. You ever drive through Oklahoma? So flat. And Yelena's like, have you slept? And he's like, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And Walker's like, well, we'd like to not die today, so maybe someone else should be driving. Then he says, this has the making of a team that can raise to glory, bring light from the darkness. We can be the heroes on the Wheaties box. And Yelena's like so embarrassed, but he's like, with the little kitty toy. So obviously this fits perfectly with what he was saying before about wanting to be the hero, wanting to be adored, right? It all fits perfectly. Anyway, she just says, I just find it best to ignore him. Then they realize a convoy is approaching fast, so Walker says step on it. Of course, stepping on it in this limo means pretty much going 44 miles per hour. So obviously this thing catches up to them and pulls out the guns. So Red Guardian's like engaging defensive measures, which pretty much just turns on the hoop-de-hoo lights and opens up the alcohol containers. So then they start firing on the vehicle. Red Guardian says, don't worry, she's bulletproof. And obviously she's not. So Ghost says, Walker, get out your shield, which he does, and screams, what happened to bulletproof? And he's like, well, bulletproof-ish. So Yelena decides she's going to take action, fires on the vehicle. Might be the reason it's destroyed, or maybe it's because Bucky's finally shown up, which again, I think Val's assistant is the one that tipped Bucky off to this whole thing. So man, does he ever look so cool. I love Bucky. So then Walker's like, is that Bucky? And Red Guardian's like, oh, the Winter Soldier. That guy's so cool. I cannot wait to see Red Guardian and Bucky together in this movie. Because remember, they were in that What If episode in season 3, and they were so much fun together. So anyway, Bucky now arrives. He blasts loose the tow cable on this truck, puts on the brakes, grabs the end of the tow cable, and totally flips the truck over. I love that move. So that means everything's all right? No, it does not. They're like, oh, that's not good. And he shoots the little device on the back of their vehicle that causes it to explode, and I'm assuming at that point is able to take them all out. Because when they wake up, they're all being captured by him. Now, he says there's some big threat out there, and you are going to help me stop it. And they're like, what, us? And he's like, yeah, you got somewhere else you need to be? And Red Guardian's like, I love that guy. Anyway, he says, so you can do something about it now or live with it forever. So he's trying to get them to all team up with him to, I think, try to take down Sentry. In fact, notice this shot, he's on the phone. I'm betting he's again talking with Val's assistant, trying to figure out what is going on. So now it's time for them to break into Avengers Tower, or what used to be Avengers Tower. We have Bucky driving and Red Guardian up front. Red Guardian asks, what kind of super serum did you get? Bucky's like, I don't know, regular, Hydra? He's like, oh, fancy. But now they're ready to ram the building. Bucky screams, Red Guardian screams, and into the building goes the truck. Now, we learned from CinemaCon that Yelena, Ghost, and Walker are actually in the back of this truck, which totally makes sense because they come out, the opening in the back, and they just start crushing everybody, all these guards, one at a time. Ghost takes action, Bucky crushes one, Yelena wipes one out, and then they're all standing around trying to decide, what do we do next? I mean, Yelena says, none of us can fly, so what, do we just punch and shoot? And then we learned something really interesting from CinemaCon. Val calls down and says, guys, I left the door unlocked. Come on upstairs. So that's why they're now all in the elevator. And we hear Val saying, we're brought up with this belief that there are good guys and there are bad guys. But eventually you come to realize there are bad guys and there are worse guys and nothing else. So now they get upstairs, and she's saying, how crazy is it to think of all the monumental fights that have happened exactly here where you're standing? And of course, this is the same Avengers Tower, changed over to the Watchtower, because this bar looks just like the one where Tony Stark served drinks in Avengers and in Age of Ultron. All right, so then they're not happy, right? You can see it on their faces. But also, we see behind them what looks like a Chitauri weapon, because Val's got all kinds of mementos from the Chitauri battle. And then we get confirmation that she bought Avengers Tower. She says, this place wasn't cheap, but it's got good optics. And then I love this. She says, look at you, so adorable. Now, I have theorized since they showed this scene in one of the earlier trailers that this is fake, that is not really Taskmaster and they CGI'd her in. Well, lo and behold, in the most recent trailers, they forgot to include her, right? These two scenes are just seconds apart, right? But look at that. Boom and none. Too funny. They've given up. They've just given up trying to fake us out. Anyway, she says, I send you down there to kill each other, but instead you make nice and form a team. So this was a really important line that was said only in the CinemaCon footage, but we now know for certain, yes, she set them up to all be killed. And talk about brazen to say that to their faces. Yelena does not find it funny, right? No, she does not. Yikes. All right, but this is when we get the confirmation she did not expect Red Guardian to be there, because she says, who's this old Santa? And the joke there is because David Harbour played Santa Claus in the movie Violent Night. Really good movie, by the way. Very violent, but really good movie. Anyway, he says, I'm Red Guardian, and she's like, what? So yeah, she did not expect him to be here. Then I think Bucky almost facetiously is saying, what's the plan? In other words, they know what she's done. The jig is up. They're ready to take her in. So what's your plan, Val? And then she throws out this insult saying it's embarrassing he only served less than half a term. This is another line that was only said in the CinemaCon footage. But what on earth? So he's not a congressman in Brave New World. He becomes a congressman in this movie. And by the end of the movie, he's no longer a congressman? Poor Bucky. Man, poor Bucky. Anyway, Sentry now makes his big entrance, picks up his belt buckle, which if we flip it, we can definitely see that's an S, and starts walking down the stairs. Those are his boots. Of course, this is what he looked like in the comics, and we can see the other members of the team are right over there. Now, I think Val is introducing him by saying, witness the invincible, stronger than all the Avengers rolled into one, and soon to be known as Earth's mightiest hero. Well, Red Guardian shouts out, we are the Thunderbolts. He's obviously trying to get that name to stick. Bucky seems to open fire, probably on Sentry, but that doesn't last long because Sentry grabs his arm, and I think that's when he's saying, there's no use fighting. You're not Earth's mightiest heroes. And then he says, you thought you were going to be some great saviors? You can't even save yourself. And he just chucks Bucky's arm on the ground. Goodness gracious. Then, at some point, Red Guardian charges him, and you can kind of see Sentry just a little bit there over on the left, but he chucks Red Guardian out the window. So I'm assuming he finds some way to pull him back in again. I mean, Red Guardian would not survive that fall, so something happens to bring him back inside. But anyway, I think Val is now starting to realize this dude's insane. Like, what have I done? What have I done? So then we see that Sentry has now been taken over fully by the Void. In the comics, this is what the Void looks like, but it seems like in the movie, they're just having Sentry be basically devoid of any color. Also, this is the window that I think Red Guardian was thrown out of. So now the Thunderbolts head down to street level, and you can see the poor Walker's shield has been bent, so I don't even know what it's made out of, but whatever it is was nothing to Sentry, who just crushed it. Yelena is saying, we can't do this. No one here is a hero. I think everybody's taking a moment to try to decide what to do, and then Red Guardian says, we are the Thunderbolts. He's not giving up on that name. Thunderbolts, it's a cool name. And Yelena's like, oh my gosh, please no. Bucky's like, we can't call ourselves that. And Ghost is like, yeah, that's terrible. And Walker's like, thank you, thank you. All right, so the reason I think things haven't gone too crazy yet is look at all the people behind them walking on the street. I mean, no one's running in fear. Everybody's just kind of hanging out. So I think now, though, things are about to go crazy. So we see Bucky making this big save because this runaway truck slams into this news truck, sending the truck flying, and Yelena doesn't know what to do, right? But Bucky runs out to save these people, uses his arm to ricochet the truck over his head and make sure they're safe, which that was sweet. All right, so then we see the Void decides to flex his powers. He says, I am the Void. There's no use fighting. Why would a god take orders from anyone at all? Maybe I need to show you what I'm capable of. So this is crazy. First of all, look at his little beady eyes. The only things you can see are two little dots of his eyes. But then, remember this dude? This was the dude that was working with Val, probably her right-hand man. He's gone. He just sends him into the Void. And I'm betting that that's what he does to everybody flying the helicopter, which is why this helicopter loses power, careens against this scaffolding here, and knocks it over, causing it to start falling. So yeah, now there's tons of debris falling down. And then we see the Thunderbolts are like, oh crap, what do we do? And in fact, stuff keeps falling down, crushing these cars, and this little girl would have been crushed if not for the fact the Red Guardian runs in and takes one on his back. My word, that dude's pretty strong, because that would really, really hurt. And then we see them all trying to hold up this giant piece of concrete. They're obviously very winded from that. So they're standing there trying to figure out what to do when, man, it gets crazy because Void starts to float down and show everyone just how powerful he is. Just wiping people out, right? Wiping this girl out, goodbye. Wiping this dude out, goodbye. I really want to know, where did they go? Are they just gone? Are they truly dust? Or have they been sent to whatever the Void is? In fact, we kind of get our answer because now the city is being thrown into the Void. Slowly, the whole of New York is being pulled into the Void, which makes you wonder, what is Kingpin doing right now? I mean, theoretically, this is happening around the same time as Daredevil Born Again, and Kingpin is mayor, so I'm sure he's not happy about this. Anyway, in the comics, this is what the Void looks like when it takes over New York. So yeah, not good. In fact, these people just dusted, right? Just dusted. Anyway, so I think this is now when they decide to enter the Void. So I don't know if Yelena is the last one to enter. It kind of seems like it, but in she goes. So when they get inside the Void, I think that's when this shot is happening. Notice Bob is wearing a pair of clothes we haven't seen him wearing before, and all the Thunderbolts, except of course for Taskmaster, are all together there, maybe in that lab where Yelena had stolen some of the original supplies that ultimately created Sentry. But anyway, keep in mind Sentry's clothing there, because here's a shot where we see Red Guardian ripping up a pillow back in his house, and Sentry is over on the right wearing those same clothes. Here we see this weird chicken dude charging at them, but notice Sentry on the right there wearing the same clothes. And of course, Bucky decks the chicken. Love that. In fact, here's a behind-the-scenes shot of the same battle, so maybe Red Guardian also fights the chicken. But it's hard to tell. Is this stuff actually happening, or is it all in their minds? And I ask that because I now think these scenes are happening in the Void, and this is definitely in Yelena's mind. So she runs through this wall, falls onto this table, then notice the windows with the semicircle at the top. This is the same room as she's now running out of that, busts through this wall, then the perspective shifts again, and now she's crawling through a hole in the floor. But notice the sink over on the far right. I think it's the same bathroom where she encounters, well, herself, drunk on the floor, but she opens up her eyes and then grabs her own neck. So yeah, it just seems she's in some type of mental battle, because we even see her falling against a wall and almost fading into it, and notice the face on the left coming out of the wall. Craziness, right? But then this is fascinating. So this scene is, I believe, back in that lab again. And notice it's a different outfit, because this is what she was wearing on the left when she went to the lab originally. And of course, now she's in her combat suit, if you will. But also, notice over on the left, that's Ghost, right? It has to be. I mean, look at the little colors on her outfit, the lights, they all match up. So she's been trapped against the wall. And then here we see Bucky also stuck against the wall. So I don't know if they're battling the Sentry, while they're inside the void? Are they inside his mind at this point? I'm really curious. Anyway, she's running across the room and jumping over these things being flung at her, and then she lands on the ground. So I'm glad they haven't revealed anything more about what's happening in the void. I hope they don't show us any more scenes, but I do think this is pretty much the last scene from the movie that we've seen in the trailers. Although I will still end with this because I just think it's so sweet, where Red Guardian says, Yelena, when I look at you, I don't see your mistakes. That's why we need each other. And she's like, okay, that was really good, and gives him a big hug, which is just adorable, right? The two of them together are amazing. So yeah, Val may regret bringing them all together. Be careful who you assemble. The Thunderbolts. Asterisk. Still don't know what the asterisk is. Is it going to turn to the Avengers, the new Avengers, the Dark Avengers? I don't know. Can't wait to find out. And in fact, we only have a few more short weeks to wait, right? It's coming out before you know it. So let me know if you think I got everything in the right order, and let me know if you got your tickets for the opening weekend. I got mine, and I cannot wait. So don't forget about that contest. Be a subscriber, leave a comment. You could win a book or a steelbook, and there's the membership option in case you're interested in that. And I always love to mention the Discord. Here we are in the Marvel General section talking about that latest trailer and that incredible poster. So we have 2,100 members across the globe, conversations 24/7, and I'll leave a pinned comment so you can join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, the ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.